The estranged husband took a machete and he took her head off on her shoulders. That was pretty gruesome, to say the least. First murderer I ever met was in 1987, where a man murdered his wife. He wanted rabbit and she cooked him chicken, and he stabbed her to death. The man was arrested, he was brought into custody, and as the junior officer on the shift, my role was to look after him, to make sure that he didn't harm himself or anything like that whilst he was in custody. To meet somebody that's taken a life is the most bizarre feeling. You're meeting someone who 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour ago, they've killed somebody that they previously loved on this occasion. So it's quite a surreal experience.
Let's try and talk through a case. What happens?
Say, for instance, you're at home, right? It's 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll get a phone call. We've got a body. You'd tip out to the office, you'd meet the other guys, and you'd go to an area close to the scene. You may not necessarily go to the scene, because the fact is, the forensics are important in the way that they can't be disrupted. They have to be kept intact. The integrity of the forensics is paramount in an investigation. So you may not go to actually into the scene. That will be left to a chosen few. You'll then undertake house to house. If you've got a suspect, it may be that you're involved in the taking of swabs from that person, obtaining evidence from that person, removing their clothing, bagging it up correctly, making sure it goes to the exhibits officer correctly. If you're on the interview team, you'll be preparing from the time that you get in. You'll be reading all the statements that are available to you. You'll be preparing to interview that person. By the time you've got to speak to the suspect, you could be 12 or 13 hours into the investigation before you actually get into an interview stage with them. The process around the prisoner is fairly straightforward. It's the other work that's taking place in the background with the worker ants, if you want. They're the ones that are actually doing all the work to bring it in, and they're bringing all the jigsaw pieces together. And as an interviewer, you're taking that information and using it as part of your plan around interviewing. I think being a good communicator is the greatest technique that you've got. There's no point in being a shrinking violet if you're sitting in an interview. I could write down all the questions and read them verbatim from the piece of paper, but the fact is you've got to be a free thinker sometimes and have the ability to communicate with the person that's sitting opposite you. Sometimes you have to empathise with them. If you've got a suspect that's, as an example, murdered a family member, why has he done that? Have things got so bad for that individual? Have they been the victim of domestic violence? Is this the last step that they've undertaken in order to try and relieve themselves of the pressures that they've faced over the past 10, 15, 20 years?
Do you ever feel a hatred for the people you're interviewing?
It's not my job to hate somebody. That's not my job. My job is to try and identify for the family why we are in this situation, why we've got a child, an adult in a mortuary. The police's role is to prove as well as disprove, or disprove as well as prove that somebody's involved. If they haven't done anything wrong, then we'll soon find that out and they'll be released from custody. But my job isn't to hate somebody. I was asked a question previously around, is this like the TV? It's nothing like the TV. The fact is that you've got a lot of people working on one inquiry, and it could take weeks. This isn't Morse. This doesn't take an hour to clear up. This could take weeks to clear up. People that are working on these different squads, they sacrifice so much in relation to their home lives and what they do in their personal life in order to undertake the role that they do. And it's fantastic, but they are unsung heroes in my eyes. My kids could tell where I was by the news, not by what their mum was telling them, because they would see, oh, there's been a murder in such and such, and they knew what I did. It was dereliction of my duties as a father, because it takes its toll. I will tell you a funny story. I went to one where the lady hadn't been seen. Elderly lady had died in her house. That was standard practice for probationers to go to a sudden death, as we used to call them. And I broke into the house. I let my colleague in. There's a lady collapsed on the bed, and I said, I called up on the radio, she's dead. And this lady sits bolt upright and says, "I'm not dead, I'm not dead." I'm like, oh, my life. But yeah, so, you know, there are some funny sides to policing as well.
What's some of the worst things you've seen?
I suppose the decapitation of a victim. Lady was walking down the street. She just dropped the kids off at school. Just dropped the kids off, and the estranged husband, took a machete and he took her head off on her shoulders. That was pretty gruesome, to say the least. One murder that actually sticks in my mind was where a man from Mauritius was murdered. He was having an affair, allegedly, and when his family came to see the body in the mortuary, they asked to have a photograph taken with him. So I had to get permission from the coroner for them to stand around the body and for me to take a photograph of them standing around the body, giving it the thumbs up and the big smiles. I found that quite unnerving, let's put it that way. But yeah, there's been a few bits and pieces like that you think, well, that's a bit macabre. You know, somebody who's been murdered, strangled, and then someone has set light to their house. I mean, the necessity and proportionality is bad enough that they've killed them in the first place. That one actually went to a post-mortem, and the fantastic pathologist spotted that the bone in the neck had been broken, and the only way that will get broken is if there had been strangulation. Up until that point, we didn't know how he died. So the only way that you would have sustained that injury is if somebody had killed you.
You talk through all these horrific things. Why do you do it?
Oh, it's brilliant. Honestly, I get why people see it as being depressing. I understand that, but you know what? If you're serving the victim to the best of your ability, if you're supporting the family to the best of your ability, if you identify the person responsible and they get convicted at court, you are part of a team that has successfully brought somebody to justice for the most horrendous crime.
Has there been a change in the types of murders then?
A murder's a murder's a murder. Jack the Ripper was doing it in the late 1800s. The method hasn't changed. It's one person taking another person's life.